Continue our conversations from Paris. My guest, Claude Picasso. Those of you who watch this program know of my interest in the painter. You know about the one-hour program we did about Picasso's portraiture and the upcoming portrait and profile of François Gillot. François Gillot's son, Claude Picasso, the son of Pablo Picasso, and François Gillot lives here in Paris, and we want to talk to him about the Musée Picasso and about his father. Welcome to this program. It's great to have you here. Good morning. We're taping in the morning, in the afternoon, at night, and this comes in the morning. Take me back to what happened to this huge estate that when your dad died, how it ended up, so much of it here at Musée Picasso.
Well, it's a very lucky thing that happened is that just previously, before my father died, the French government introduced a law which is called a didnt, which allows you to pay taxes by offering works of art or works of historical artifacts that are that would add to the patrimony of France.
Yes.
That's what they call it. It's a description.
It's the patrimony of Paris. Yes.
And so
these paintings were painted on our turf, and therefore.
Yes. And so we first had to do an inventory of everything that he had left, which was an enormous job, because he left behind more than 70,000 items of his own work, and we had to. It had to take a little while to do it quite seriously, photographing it, measuring and cataloging everything. And then once we had that, we started making up lists, and in conjunction with some museum curators, we drew up a wonderful list. And the plan was not just to turn over these works to the government, but to also at the same time create a museum which would be anthological and as complete as possible about Picasso's oeuvre.
Yeah.
It would cover every angle and every possible thing that
the most complete reflection of the body of work that had in an extraordinary lifetime.
Yes. And it would also go in depth, and it would also have the archives of Picasso and even his personal collection of other artists or primitive art and such as things. So it would recreate in a way the ambiance of Picasso's home. So we had to find a home.
Yes.
That was a big problem because in Paris, as you know, it's very overcrowded. There are some large buildings, but they're all taken up by embassies, government agencies or whatever, and we had to find one. So finally, the search narrowed down to a wonderful place in the Marais district of Paris, which was an old mansion that had become a school of arts and crafts, and which was absolutely in terrific, total ruins, but had even some elephants living in there, and 2 elephants were living in the building, and all these students who were just being students.
Yeah.
So they were all asked politely to leave the building, and then the building was turned into a proper museum, which is a fantastic place.
How many works of art there?
Oh, there are about 3,500 works altogether. But they are, of course, the cream of the cream.
Yes.
And eventually, people have given more works to the place, and we hope that it'll grow.
Yes. Even
even though it's probably going to explode because there are so many works in it. But it allows for temporary shows to be put on, of special interest shows and so on, and it's very exciting. I mean, it's a sort of lively place. It's not just a dead place where you go there once and you don't have to come back to it.
Right.
On the contrary, this is very amusing because you go there once and you can come back forever, and there's always something else happening there.
Why didn't he leave a will?
Well, because I think he probably was not very a very great friend of paperwork.
He was
an artist. He was not an administrator.
It has been said by some, and there's nothing I can say about Picasso you haven't heard, that the idea of thinking about death was not something that he ever wanted to do, that he just was so much in love with living
Yes,
that
that's
thinking
true.
about death was not something. And to write a will was thinking about
Well,
death.
it was like writing himself off. Probably he probably thought, I'm writing myself dead or something.
Yes.
And that really didn't gel with his way of doing things.
Every day there is a Picasso exhibition somewhere. Last year in New York at MoMA, Picasso's portraiture.
Yes,
As we speak in Washington, the young Picasso.
yes,
It has exploded
yes.
and grows since his death.
Yes, it's an absolutely amazing fact that ever since Picasso died, there have been more books published, more exhibitions put on, and that it has become more like a Picasso mania, or
Yes,
something
it
like
is.
this,
Yes.
than even Picasso love. It used to be that we had a few aficionados, or
Yes,
something
right,
like this.
right.
But now we
Curators
have
and few.
we have fans, and it's like a sort of a rock and roll act. Because it goes from town to town and it moves, on a world tour
Yes,
constantly.
yes.
And sometimes, we have like 2 or 3 venues at the same time, all over the world.
There's an exhibition, 2 or 3 exhibitions all the time somewhere.
Yes, and every exhibition which is a theme, which is, let's say, for instance, in Paris right now we have an exhibition which is called Les années 30, it's the 30s.
Yes, and in Washington,
and of course it includes Picasso. And then on the other end of Paris, we have another exhibition, and it also includes Picasso. And just outside of Paris, you have a still life show, and of course it includes Picasso. And everywhere you turn, there's Picasso.
How do you prevent people from misusing the image or the name or the photograph?
A few years ago, I was named by the French courts the administrator of the estate. So I have set up an office, and I have arrangements with authors' rights societies throughout the world. And in some countries where they do not exist, I have agents, lawyers, whatever, who act as my correspondents and who watch. And so I have a lot of watchdogs, and I am a big watchdog myself. It means that you have to organize and you have to be very thorough. You buy the papers.
See what's going on.
You screen all TV channels, and you do all sorts of things.
Watch movies that are being made.
Watch movies that are being made and try to stop them from being made, some of them.
Yes.
But mostly we encourage everybody to do interesting things. And it's not only, it's not sufficient to forbid it. You also have to encourage, so to encourage good things. So when you try and find, interesting partners to work with, that shows the level you want to be on. So obviously anybody who wants to do something that's not on the level, you say, look, you are not on the level, so we will turn you away. We'll refuse to work with you, or we'll ask them to come to par, something, and that's the way you do things. Of course, there are always pirates, and people who try to steal from you. But an interesting thing that has happened together with the Picasso mania is that these days people consider Picasso like something like a brand. They don't even need the work anymore. The name means something like Coca-Cola.
Yes.
And people are starting to stamp the name only on anything.
Yes.
Which is very annoying, because that's not we never thought we were a brand. We are not Yves Saint Laurent.
Yeah, exactly. We're not in the merchandising business.
We're
of
not
selling a name.
a brand. So it's very curious.
How do you explain, other than the fact we're talking about one of the great painters of the 20th century, Picasso mania? There is no Matisse mania.
Yes.
There is no Cézanne mania. There is Picasso.
Exactly. It's the name. It's the man. Of course, I think the the man has been mythologized because his life and his lifestyle is relatively amusing and unconventional, and I think people like maybe this idea. Also, his political involvement, with certain causes, which had to do with peace and all this sort of thing, have struck many people's imagination, and he did posters for all these political causes like political prisoners, or he helped in the Spanish War to fight against the fascist the people, and he painted Guernica and all of this sort of thing. So that's something that people really are attracted to, and they think he's politically correct, something like
exactly.
this.
The interesting thing too is the scope of the career, how long he painted.
Yes.
And how early he painted, and the recognition by his father how good he was at an early age, and the fact that he was painting until his death in the south of France. It must be for you to look at you and to know and to see Picasso in you, having looked at enough paintings and portraits of Picasso, and to also have seen great paintings of you. I mean, you are the sitter,
yes,
the subject for some of the great paintings of the 20th century.
Yes, well, as a matter of fact, it's interesting what you just said, the sitter. And then you caught yourself because you know because you've heard before. I never sat.
I know exactly. That's right.
And hardly ever anybody sat for my father because that's not the way he worked.
Exactly.
And he had terrific, sense of observation, and he would just do everything from memory.
Right.
In fact, for him, it was rather disturbing to have anybody sit in front of him, because that would, sort of freeze him. He would not feel as free and as generous in his ideas.
There's a famous story of Gertrude Stein.
Yes.
In which he painted after how many 90 sittings he didn't have it right,
90,
and she went away.
No, he went away.
He went away
for the whole summer.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the minute he came back, he saw the painting, said, "Whoa," and he just took her face off and then painted her
from his mind.
Directly, as a minute, he took her face off and then painted her again, and that was that.
Yeah.
That was the end. That was the painting that he always was looking for after 90 sittings.
Exactly. And then it just proves the point well.
Yes.
And the other thing that was amazing about that is that people her friends came to her and said, "Oh, that's not you."
Yeah.
And she said,
"No, my father said, well, maybe now, but you'll see, you'll end up looking like the painting."
And it was true.
Yes,
she did. And she said that too.
Yes.
She always said, "It is me." She said,
yes, and it is me now. Yes.
And then after that, it was always painting from memory and always painting.
Yes, and it's true. And if you think today, everyone knows. Many people know about Gertrude Stein, and what do they know about Gertrude Stein?
Picasso.
That painting. They don't really know her even in a photograph or anything like this. It's really quite amusing.
What are your earliest memories of him?
Well, obviously, when I was a child and a small child, and when we lived in the south of France, and it was rather amusing. And of course, when you're a child, everything's very amusing and simple and light and gay, and so the usual sort of thing.
You remember a father who happened to paint?
Yeah, he happened to paint, and he happened to make sculptures and do things like that, which were very amusing, and sometimes. It involved me in the strangest ways, because I used to, as many boys, sort of bang out my toys and destroy them, and I don't know what. And he always liked to keep everything, so he collected my toys and took them to the studio, and then. The famous sculpture of the baboon and young, which includes 2 of my cars, and of course, that was really outrageous. I thought that was disgusting. How come, how dare you, steal my cars and turn them into a monkey? But Later on, I learned it was much more interesting what he had done with the cars than what I had done.
That's great.
And actually, eventually I was very happy. But it's at the time, it just didn't make my day.
But to see some of the pictures and see the together at the beach in different places,
yes.
I mean, it seemed that Picasso had something like a child's wonder about things.
Yes, yes. He liked children.
Yes,
very
some men
much.
can
Yes.
relate to children.
Really,
and can
yes.
almost be.
Yes. He absolutely related to children completely. Always, you can see. I mean, even with other children, sometimes you see photographs of my father with other children. You can see there's always, an easy-going relationship. Absolutely, yes. Yeah. And we had a great time. I mean, we absolutely had a great time. He made toys for us. He made, so it's really, sort of amusing because he made toys for us, and then we see them in the catalogue raisonné of the work of Picasso. It's sort of like a little strange.
It is. That's what I'm.
Because it has to end up there too. It's in a way it's silly, but it's like that.
Now, it must have been an incredibly painful period when your mother left.
Well, for everyone,
yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
Everyone went through this in their different ways, but it was, of course, unsettling. Yes.
Yeah. She is a remarkable woman.
Yes, she's absolutely fantastic.
I mean, to have a painter. First of all, the painter herself.
Yes.
And knew Picasso. To know her, and we have seen her here in Paris. You can talk about things. Léger. She knew Léger.
Of course, yes.
Talk about, of course,
yes,
exactly, of course.
Yes.
You could talk about Matisse.
Yes.
Not only knew Matisse.
No, but they were very close.
They were very close.
Me too.
You too. I mean, this blows my mind. You can understand someone who grew up in a small town in America. And
yes, but that's why I consider. Many times people ask me, "Oh, what's it like, to be the son of such a person?" And I say, "Well, don't forget, it's the son of two persons anyway, the mother and the father, who are both, really, something else."
Yes.
But it's extremely lucky. I have to say, I consider myself extremely lucky because I was, raised amongst the best of people that you could possibly find on
the highest level of quality
on the planet. Yes, at the time, and I still try to continue, being in touch with all the better people and the younger people, mostly today. But it's been really fantastic. As you say, you know Matisse. Yes, we know Matisse. Or Cocteau or anybody else. People who are very powerful in what they did artistically or literary in literature or whatever.
Do you, other than appearance and other than some sense of quality, clearly, in the genes, is there a sense, a love of art, a love of
in the genes,
for Paloma?
Of course, I know. Of course, I know. I mean, Paloma too. But of course, we know more, than most people know, but what we know was very easily acquired.
Yeah.
Some people know more than we do, but they have made a huge effort to acquire that knowledge, and that the quality of the knowledge is always different, and everybody's way of acquiring knowledge is different. There's always sort of an edge, for us. Let's say we speak of Matisse. Of course, the difference is we knew Matisse, but not only that, but we lived in an artist studio. Many children have lived in an artist studio, but we also happen to have visited a lot of different studios and some of the best studios, and so I don't know what that gives, but obviously it has to give something, and that's acquired, but. In the genes, I don't know. The genes. Yes, of course. My grandfather on my father's side was a professor of fine arts,
right?
And but on my mother's side, he was an engineer, an agronomist. A man with plants and flowers, but he was a businessman basically. And what does that give? It's probably good. It's probably
it gives you a scientist who paints and appreciates it.
No, but it's probably and my mother became a fantastic painter and a writer and so on. So we have an interesting mixture, and of course we have an easier time understanding and appreciating art, I think, than most people who've never lived near it. And but for instance, I have a total bias. I cannot read. I cannot. I can appreciate, but I don't really like. I don't love. Anything that's before. Before the 20th century.
Yeah.
I'm only really happy and comfortable with 20th century art.
Because that's what you lived and knew, and
because that's what I consider art. Even as a little boy, when I went to the Louvre with my father and my mother, when I was very small. I would go there and we'd visit, and I would always say, oh yes, it's fine. But in this place, they have the big paintings, where you have battle scenes or what have these crownings and all so forth. I would say, oh, this is the cinema, and then the nice portraits and everything. I say, oh, you see, this is photography, but at home we have painting, because to me, painting was what we did at home and what we had, around us with, our friends or so forth. But at the Louvre, it was not painting.
No, it was something else. Yeah. He would keep. Did he work on more than one painting at the same time? I mean, he constantly had three or four canvases. He was constantly
more even, and things just happened, one after the other, and he worked on different things, on sculpture, painting, lithography, drawing,
ceramics.
All blended and went back and forth and between each other. Yeah. There was always a dialogue within his art, because sometimes he would resolve certain problems he had in painting by trying it out in sculpture, and then the sculpture would bring him some increment further, and then he would come back to the painting and not the same canvas, another one, and then go on, and so forth. You see the film, the Picasso mystery.
Yes,
the film he made with Clouseau.
Right.
Well, in this film, at the end, you see a painting which gets started, becomes totally destroyed, and start over again. And he says it's a total mess. You see how impossible it is to make a painting, and he says it's just this. You see, it's a total write-off, and the film ends like that. So, but do you know what happened next? He went home and he started making a whole series of sculpture that was like the painting, but it was a number of sculptures that were set up as they would have been in the painting. Then he put a canvas in the back of the sculptures to see what would happen, and so on and so on. And eventually, the whole thing progressed like that, and then he just chucked the whole thing and forgot about it and went on to something else.
Yeah. It reminds me of the whole notion of so many of the paintings have a history just like that. La Demoiselle d'Avignon at the Museum of Modern Art didn't show it for years after he painted it, correct?
But because everyone thought he was crazy.
Including George Braque.
Yes. He said, Braque said, one day we'll find him hanging behind the painting. And Matisse said, it's like drinking petrol to see this painting. So it was pretty wild at the time. Today or anything goes.
But at that time it was.
But in those days it was super incredible. Yes.
Do you have a favorite period in terms of your own appreciation?
I always stress the fact that the sculpture is very, very important. Everyone always reacts and thinks of Picasso in terms of painting because he was a painter, but his sculpture, the body of work of sculpture, is absolutely extraordinary. Also, there is another part to the sculpture which is a ceramic.
Right.
But it's ceramic because it's terracotta. But in fact, it is sculpture because a lot of that was turned into bronze, so it becomes formal sculpture. But most people think, it's just ceramic, terracotta, playing around. But in fact, it's totally unjustified because some of the great pieces come from that period in the 50s. When we lived in Valoris, when he made all these assemblages and things, you know, just like the baboon with the cars, you know, the car head, and all these other things that he made in those days were all part of the fact that he was involved with this material that could be molded.
He didn't do any self-portraits. Bear with me.
Yeah.
In the beginning, things like this is from Musee Picasso, and it's one of the famous early, and then near the end, except that he always said, every painting is a reflection of the painter.
Yes.
Yeah, but no self-portraits
Towards the end.
until the end. Yeah.
Yes, it's true. And I think, you know, it's always curious. If you look at art history, very often painters do self-portraits when they are young.
Yes.
And sometimes only when they are old, but mostly when they are young. It's constant.
Right.
And so that's I think he did it that way. And there's another moment when he was almost 50, when he was in the 1930s, when he had a lot of problems with his family. When he did things where you can see his profile, I mean, he's there, you know.
Yeah.
But I think later on it did not interest him. And what he did is quite amusing. Is that he would make drawings or engravings or whatever of Rembrandt.
Yes.
And of course, those are Rembrandt self-portraits.
Yeah.
So it's just as for him it was like doing a self-portrait. I think in a way, because he went and addressed himself to art history, and he recycled it in the modern way in order to find and to rebuild art history as he had always known it, and which he had destroyed. Because with Demoiselle of Avignon, he breaks down art history. You know, art history breaks down. You have art history going along very nicely, peacefully until the Demoiselle d'Avignon, and all of a sudden we have 20th century art, and that's modern art.
Right.
It's not art. All of a sudden it's modern art, and so he felt a little bit responsible, and he thought, well, I better try and figure out how to rebuild this. And by the 50s, when he was quite mature, and in late 50s, he started to address all the great masters, and rebuilding all the great masters in the modern fashion, in modern vein. And self-portrait was not that important, but he took the Manet or Rembrandt or Van Gogh and people like this, and he would, sort of paint them his way, but with their pose.
Yes.
So it's sort of a self-portrait of painting. Painting history being, Picasso was art history, so he just recycled art history, and by using Rembrandt, he sort of made Rembrandt into himself. It was the same thing, I feel. He completely identified with Rembrandt or people like this.
Musee Picasso, I look forward to visiting it, and I thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to have you on the program and to know you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My thanks to Claude Picasso, and a special thanks to all the people who helped make Paris so enjoyable for all of us. Our thanks to the people at Bloomberg Television in Paris, Kay Koplovitz, Steve Wynn, and everybody we met along this journey. We'll see you tomorrow night from New York.